The offshore account password was 12 characters long, contained a Greek letter, and had never once been written down except in my little red notebook, the one tucked behind a fake cereal box on my pantry shelf. I used to joke that if I got hit by a bus, the company would hemorrhage liquidity within 48 hours. It wasn't a joke. There were $41.2 million across 5 jurisdictions, all under my discreet, unassuming control. I wasn't just an accountant, I was a vault. 15 years in that corner office with the flickering fluorescent bulb and the dying ficus. 15 years of invoices, audits, and the sacred knowledge that when the old man, Walter Kessler, the founder, said, "Nicole, if the wolves ever come, this is where we hide the meat," he meant every syllable. I kept the wolves out. Hell, I could name every contractor who ever touched that balance sheet. I'd seen 3 CEOs come and go, 2 mergers, hostile takeover, and one truly catastrophic Christmas party that ended with the VP of sales driving his Tesla through the loading dock gate. Through it all, I balanced the books and buried the bones. And I liked it that way. I liked my yogurt at 11:30 and my lunchtime Sudoku in ink. I liked my rusted sedan that no one ever keyed and my 800 credit score. I liked that no one asked what I did after hours because they assumed, correctly, that it involved herbal tea and reruns of murder, she wrote. Stability wasn't boring, it was armor, it was peace. And in my line of work, peace was the most undervalued currency in the market. Oh, and quick sidebar before the wolves get too close. If you're listening to this and you're part of the 97% who haven't subscribed, fix that. I'm trying to hit 10,000 subscribers so I can tell my cat I'm finally worth something. Every tap helps, and I promise. The story only gets darker from here. Back to Walter. He wasn't a saint, but he believed in contingency. He came from Depression-era parents who stored cash in Tupperware under the floorboards, and he carried that paranoia into modern finance like it was gospel. The offshore accounts weren't a way to cheat taxes, they were a way to survive collapse. Political, economic, reputational, you name it. If the company ever burned, these accounts were the fire extinguisher. And guess who held the extinguisher? Me, Nicole Windsor, age 53. Quiet, methodical, with a penchant for spreadsheets that could make a grown man weep. No husband, no kids, just a cat named Chairman Meow and a record of spotless annual audits that even the IRS once complimented in writing. If the company was a ship, I wasn't the captain, I was the ballast. No one noticed me until they leaned too far and capsized. Until Damien. But he hadn't arrived yet, not in this part of the story. Here, everything was still quiet. The coffee still brewed at 7:03 every morning. My inbox still dinged with the exactitude of a metronome. I still said good morning to Carl in logistics and fake laughed at Janet's meme of the day Slack messages. There was even a new shipment of toner for the big printer that always broke, and I tucked the invoice into the paid folder with a kind of mundane joy only accountants understand. I knew which execs were cooking their expense reports and which departments padded their numbers during Q4 to avoid budget cuts. But I never tattled. I nudged. I warned. I made it clear in my own quiet, passive-aggressive way that I saw everything. And they trusted me because of it. Walter had told the board before he passed that if the day ever came when someone needed the keys to the kingdom, they'd have to come through me. But then Walter died. And the board, true to corporate form, decided Nicole has it handled was no longer sufficient risk mitigation. They wanted flash. They wanted disruption. They wanted someone who would digitize the culture and bring a startup mentality to legacy systems. And that's how Damien Glass slid into our lives. A 34-year-old MBA wonderkind with a LinkedIn profile that looked like it had been styled by an Instagram influencer. He was all teeth and keywords, with a handshake like a soft-boiled egg. The kind of man who said, "Let's circle back," before you even knew what the hell you were circling. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This part of the story, the calm before the tech bro storm, was the last time I felt invisible in a good way. Last time I opened my little red notebook, saw the access codes still neatly inked in Walter's precise handwriting, and felt safe. Next came the meeting, the firing, the coffee, the storm. But right now, I was still just a woman with secrets no one remembered she had. And that, my friend, was their first mistake. Damien's first official act as CEO was to send out a company-wide email with more buzzwords than an Adderall-fueled TED talk. Subject line, igniting quantum synergy, let's disrupt together. I nearly choked on my peppermint tea. Dear team, it began, we are at the dawn of a bold paradigm, a frontier of limitless potential. Legacy mindsets are the true disruptor, and not in a good way winking face. I challenge each of you to demolish comfort zones, reimagine deliverables, and manifest innovation through cultural recalibration. Time to trim the fat and fuel the rocket. Let's blast off. Blast off? I'm a CPA, not a damn astronaut. He signed it with exponential energy, Damien Glass Globe Rocket, a grown man, with an emoji signature. Let that sink in. He arrived the next morning like a walking LinkedIn algorithm, tight slacks, a Patagonia vest over a crisp, logo-free tee, and those god-awful white knit sneakers that look like orthopedic marshmallows. His hair was gelled into the kind of tsunami wave you only see on reality dating shows, and his cologne hit the sinuses like a tax audit. It smelled like sandalwood and shareholder lawsuits. He didn't introduce himself to the team, he presented himself like a new iPhone. Started with the devs, tossing out jargon like agile verticals and data liquidity, and made a loud detour to HR to announce he was revamping the culture into something more dynamic and less beige. I sat at my desk, sipping my tea and rereading the quarterly tax statements, trying to stay invisible. It was a trick I'd perfected over the years. Don't blink, don't breathe too loud, and maybe the hurricane passes without flipping your desk. Didn't work. Nicole, right? He said, looming in the doorway of my office like an app update no one asked for. Wow, how long have you been holding down the fort? 15 years, I replied evenly. Senior financial systems analyst. I manage right? Institutional memory. Super valuable, love that. But we're entering a new epoch now, more cloud, less clutter. We'll be streamlining a lot of processes, elevating efficiencies. You know what I mean. I know what a spreadsheet is, I said. I also know when someone's trying to fix things that aren't broken. He laughed, but his eyes didn't. All due respect, Nicole, sometimes the rustiest pipes are the ones that burst first. Just something to chew on. He left before I could answer, but his words curdled in the air like sour milk. Rustiest pipes. That night, I sat on my couch with Chairman Meow asleep beside me and the TV muted, thinking about that phrase. I wasn't rusty, I was seasoned. I'd seen a dozen tech messiahs like him flare up and burn out, always chasing revolutions in places that needed reliability. Still, something about his tone, it wasn't just arrogance. It was theatrical, like he'd already cast me in some personal drama I hadn't auditioned for. Over the next week, the office changed. He installed standing desks in every department but didn't order chairs. People whispered about impromptu meetings that turned into lectures. He declared Thursdays disruption days, where you weren't allowed to work on your actual job, but had to brainstorm ways to reboot your own role. It was like someone turned the office into a startup cosplay event. And then the reorgs began. Middle managers reshuffled like playing cards. Two entire departments merged without warning, causing chaos with payroll. Damien issued video updates every Friday, grinning at the camera like a motivational speaker at a timeshare seminar, throwing around phrases like pain is growth and friction breeds greatness. He barely made eye contact with me after that first encounter. But I noticed him watching me once during a budget meeting, that same polite smirk twitching at the corner of his mouth like he was already mentally redecorating my office into a kombucha lounge. I was a problem, not loud, not rebellious, just too solid, too anchored, the kind of person who made it hard for guys like him to play God. And I knew that men like Damien didn't just want to lead, they wanted to be seen breaking something first. It made them feel like conquerors. In that moment, something shifted. The spreadsheets, the accounts, the systems I'd tended like a garden, suddenly they weren't just work. They were leverage. He didn't know it yet, but the very thing he dismissed as outdated furniture, that was the foundation he was standing on. And some foundations know how to crack back. The meeting invite came at 7:02 a.m. Subject line, mandatory, vision realignment and team energization. No agenda, no explanation. Just a 1-hour block at 3 p.m. in the 10th floor conference center, a space usually reserved for quarterly board meetings and nervous IPO chatter. The kind of room that smelled like stress and overcooked coffee. I arrived 2 minutes early. Damien strolled in 15 minutes late, holding a green juice the exact color of envy. He wore a black turtleneck like he thought he was channeling Steve Jobs, though the effect landed more midlife crisis mime. He didn't sit. He prowled up and down the aisle like a coked-up motivational speaker, eyes scanning the room like he was hunting for weak gazelles. Team, he began, voice loud and sharp enough to shave paint off drywall. We're doing today isn't just a meeting, it's a turning point. God help us. He launched into a sermon of corporate reawakening, misaligned energies, exponential potential, cultural sludges clogging innovation pipelines. He said the word synergy 6 times in the first 2 minutes and used fat trimming as a metaphor like he was auditioning for The Biggest Loser, CEO edition. I kept my expression neutral. I knew better than to roll my eyes. I'd seen how he worked. He fed off reactions like a middle school bully with a LinkedIn account. But then he stopped, right behind me, and speaking of legacy behaviors, he said, letting the sentence dangle like a noose. I felt it before I heard it, that silence, that dragging pause right before the kill. He placed his juice down on the table beside me like a surgeon setting down a scalpel. Nicole Windsor. I turned slowly, heart thudding in that slow, heavy rhythm that precedes either a heart attack or a homicide. You asked a question last week during budget alignment. He continued, voice syrupy sweet. Something about routing protocols and compliance parameters for third-party transfers? I blinked. Yes. I flagged that the policy change you approved contradicted the existing audit trail schema. There it is. He shouted, interrupting with a grin that could sterilize crops. Flagged. Perfect example of what I mean when I say legacy thinking. Instead of adapting, Nicole challenges. Instead of innovating, she interrogates. That's not synergy, that's sabotage. The room went dead silent. One of the junior analysts gasped. I saw Janet's jaw actually drop. Carl shifted uncomfortably in his seat as if trying to quietly vanish. I'm trimming fat today, Damien announced, pulling a pristine envelope from his blazer like it was the final rose on The Bachelor. And it starts with releasing those who no longer align with our core vibrational frequency. He handed the envelope to HR, who looked like she wanted to melt into the carpet, and gestured dramatically at me. Nicole Windsor, he said, tone suddenly grave, you are hereby terminated effective immediately for disruptive noncompliance and obstructionist conduct. Security will escort you off the premises. Your badge, please. I sat frozen for a full 5 seconds, not out of confusion but sheer awe at the theater of it. This man had turned a routine clarification into a public execution. He wasn't just firing me, he was using me, a sacrifice to flex his muscle, a warning shot dressed in cruelty couture. I asked a question, I finally said quietly. He smiled wider, and I gave you an answer. Uniformed guard appeared from nowhere, one of those rent-a-cop types with a badge too shiny and a belt too tight. He didn't speak, just held out his hand. I took off my lanyard slowly, calmly, like I was peeling off a life I hadn't realized had been choking me. My badge landed in his palm with a sad little clink. No one spoke, no one stood, not even Janet, who once brought me soup when I had the flu. Damien clapped once, just once. Let this be a message, he said. Evolution requires courage, and sometimes casualties. And then he walked out, just turned and sauntered off, his green juice untouched, the conference room still echoing with the sound of my erasure. I carried the cardboard box myself. HR offered help, I declined. I didn't want any more pity in my day, just my framed photo of Chairman Meow, my calculator, and my red notebook. No one made eye contact in the elevator. The ride down felt like sinking through quicksand. I hit the street, blinking against the sudden sunlight like someone who'd been underground too long. My hands trembled, not with grief but something else, something hotter, sharper. Across the street, a diner glowed in the mid-afternoon haze. I crossed toward it without thinking, box in hand, face numb, heart pulsing with something I couldn't name yet, but I would. Oh, I would. The waitress at the diner called me Han and poured coffee into a mug that looked like it hadn't seen a dishwasher since the Clinton administration. It tasted like battery acid filtered through burnt toast, but I drank it anyway. I needed the bitterness, something to cut through the numbness. I sat in the booth by the window, staring out at the monolithic glass facade of Kessler and Rose headquarters across the street. My building, my corner office, my desk lamp that flickered just a little on humid days. I could see it from here, dim behind the tint, still lit like it didn't know I was gone. The cardboard box sat beside me on the cracked vinyl seat. It weighed next to nothing, and that made me angrier than anything else. 15 years, and this was all I had to show for it. A cat photo, a dying succulent, a calculator with a busted 9 key, and a red notebook tucked beneath it all like an afterthought. Each started slow, a low ember in the gut. I replayed his words in my head, you are hereby terminated, like a cursed lullaby, that smug expression, the self-satisfied smirk. The way he made it a performance, a goddamn spectacle, a sacrifice for his ego altar, and everyone just sat there. But anger alone doesn't get you anywhere. Anger's just the fuel, you need something to light the fuse. And then it hit me, not like a whisper, not like an epiphany, no. This was a crack of thunder. A full-body jolt that made me sit up straight and stare at the window like I'd seen a ghost. The accounts, the offshore accounts, my name, my access protocols, no one else had them. Not Damien, not the new CFO, not even the goddamn board. Walter had made me promise, never digitize the codes, never send them via email, and never tell more than one living person at a time. And the last living person who knew besides me, dead 5 years, liver failure, may he rest. Damien hadn't just fired me. He'd severed the only artery connecting him to $41 million in contingency reserves, money they couldn't even list on the books, insurance money, ghost funds, the corporate version of a panic room. And now the panic room door was locked from the outside. I reached into the box and pulled out the little red notebook. The faux leather was cracked at the spine. It didn't look like much, just an old ledger book. But inside, tucked between a page of scribbled expense projections and a doodle of a coffee cup, were the protocols, 5 layers of passwords, 2 routing sheets, and a chain of custody that would make Interpol weep. My hands no longer trembled. My breath steadied. I flipped through the pages slowly, reverently like scripture. Damien had made a fatal error, not because he fired me, but because he forgot who I was. He saw a paper pusher. Leftover relic. But what I held in my hand wasn't just access, it was leverage. It was power, not the loud, stomping, boardroom kind. The quiet, lethal kind that doesn't shout, it waits. I looked back at the building. Somewhere up there, he was probably slapping himself on the back, thinking he'd made a bold move, a disruptive pivot, a visionary realignment. Let him gloat, let him preen. Because the storm hadn't started yet. The clouds were still gathering. But when they cracked, they'd rain fire. And I was the one holding the match. A slow, dangerous smile crept across my lips as I slid the notebook back into the box. The coffee was cold now, but I drank it anyway. The bitterness tasted like prophecy. That night I didn't cry. I didn't scream or down a bottle of Merlot or throw a pity party with sad music and take out lo mein. No, I did something far more dangerous. I logged into the system, not their system. Mine, the offshore architecture wasn't some clunky Excel sheet buried in a corporate folder. This was a triple-blind shell structure, built across jurisdictions, so obscure they didn't even show up on most compliance radars. Walter had it set up in '96 with the help of two Swiss attorneys and a paranoid Estonian hacker who died under suspicious circumstances. The whole thing was a digital hydra, and I was the only one who spoke its language. I didn't touch the money. That would have been obvious, even to someone like Damien, who probably thought liquidity was something you added to your protein shake. No, I chose precision. I started with account #3. The quarterly interest distribution, due in 8 days, was set to go to a holding company in Singapore. All perfectly legal, all deeply buried. I opened the routing protocol and stared at it for a while, letting the numbers burn into my retinas like a prayer. Then, with steady fingers, I altered exactly one digit, not a large one, just a checksum tag buried in the backend routing metadata. The kind of thing that, to an untrained eye, looked like a harmless hiccup, but to the Swiss clearing bank handling the transaction, anomaly. The kind that makes analysts open protocol logs at 3 a.m., scratching their heads, wondering why an account that has never once failed to clear suddenly throws back a rejection tagged with a category 32 subcode B, routing mismatch client override suspected. It wouldn't halt the whole pipeline. Just snag it like a fishhook in fabric, a little tug, a little confusion. The funds would bounce back, then forward again, then back once more. A loop, enough to trigger mild panic, enough to waste man-hours, enough to remind the company that some gears don't turn without the right hands on the crank. And those hands, they were currently unemployed. I closed the terminal, encrypted the logs, and wiped the temp cache clean. Then I poured myself a glass of water and sat in the dark, watching the ice melt. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was a reminder. A message slipped under the door. The old queen might be off the throne, but the keys to the kingdom hadn't changed hands. Not even close. And I knew the psychology of people like Damien. He wouldn't react with humility or caution, he'd lash out. Panic in private, overcompensate in public, blame the staff, fire someone innocent, maybe two, and all the while the walls would creak just a little louder, the shadows just a little longer. I went to bed that night and slept like a dragon guarding a mountain of gold. Not because I was safe, but because I finally remembered what I was. Not a casualty, not furniture. Not fat to be trimmed, I was the system, and the system was waking up. It took 16 days. 16 days before the first ripple reached the wrong desk and started curdling into panic. Long enough for them to forget me. Long enough for Damien to get comfortable. Long enough for the clock to tick just past minor glitch and into possible catastrophe. It started in Singapore. A clerk noticed the quarterly interest payout hadn't cleared. She flagged it for internal review, which was standard. The error was weird though, obscure, rare. A routing mismatch with no prior history, no pattern. They resubmitted. It bounced again. Then came the emails. First to the liaison at the Dutch firm that handled our umbrella account structure. Then to the London compliance contact who hadn't heard from me in weeks and suddenly realized my corporate credentials were inactive. That's when they got spooked, because I had always responded. I was the firewall, the translator, the person who soothed their nerves and pulled the levers. Now, static. By day 20, it reached Cassandra Quinn, Kessler and Rose, freshly minted CFO, a Harvard number slicer with an eyebrow arch so sharp it could open mail. She called a level 2 audit event and asked the IT department to pull legacy access logs. They found nothing, because there was nothing to find. The offshore systems were never run through the mainframe. They weren't legacy. They were parallel. And the one person who'd ever held the master key, escorted out with a damn cardboard box. Damien didn't take it well. I heard through the grapevine, an old friend in procurement who still played trivia on Wednesdays, that he dismissed Cassandra's report in front of the executive team. I don't need excuses, I need results, he allegedly barked. Nicole was a filing cabinet in human form. If we can't outsmart a woman who used Windows XP, then what the hell are we even doing? Classy. So naturally, he did what all terrified men in power do, blame everyone else. 3 mid-level analysts got raked over the coals during an all-hands Zoom. Cassandra was ordered to resolve the situation discreetly, which translated to a flurry of panic calls to every international contact we had, none of whom could verify routing permissions without the passkey strings. One of them even emailed back, "We are legally prohibited from altering access without the primary custodian's biometric or physical signature. Kindly advise." The biometric signature? Mine, retina scan. Left eye. Zurich, 2017. Walter's idea. Meanwhile, Damien decided to cover his ass with flair. He had HR send me a severance package, if you could call it that. PDF with Comic Sans headers. I'm not kidding. Offering continued goodwill and $2,000 in exchange for a standard NDA and waiver of claims. I read it while eating pistachios and watching a documentary on wildfires. Didn't even flinch. No reply. No call. Just let it hang in his inbox like a fart in church. Day 27, the board started asking questions. Why hadn't the Singapore transfer cleared? Why did the Cayman reports look incomplete? Why was the Dutch holding account showing an access lock? Cassandra reportedly tried to dodge, but the cracks were showing. People who don't get answers start digging. And every hole they opened led back to the same missing element, Nicole Windsor. Suddenly, the filing cabinet in human form was looking less like obsolete furniture and more like the only architect who knew where the exits were. Imagine Damien pacing in his office, trying to figure out how the hell a woman he hadn't thought about in 3 weeks had become a ghost haunting his spreadsheets. But I wasn't haunting. I was circling, waiting, and now they were almost ready for the storm. Almost desperate enough to listen. Not yet, but close. Close enough for me to sharpen the next move, because I wasn't done, not even close. The message was exactly 27 words long. I counted twice. The storm has arrived. I hope you remembered your umbrella. No greeting, no sign-off, no apology. Just the kind of sentence that makes a certain type of man reach for the phone and then realize too late that there's no one left to call. Attached a screenshot, crisp, time-stamped. A familiar Swiss banking interface displaying one of our emergency reserve accounts, $9.6 million sitting quietly like it always had. Unmoved, untouched, untouchable. But this time it bore a new addition. A subtle watermark in the lower left corner that read user. In W alpha override, they'd know what it meant. The tag was specific to the root custodian profile, mine. No one else could generate it. No one else was supposed to ever be able to generate it. And yet, there it was, glowing on their screens like the eye of God blinking awake. I sent it from a secure Dropbox through a VPN tunnel 6 layers deep, using an anonymous relay node hosted in Iceland. Walter taught me that trick after he got paranoid the NSA was watching his kombucha orders. That man may have been eccentric, but he knew how to build a bunker. I routed the email directly to Franklin D. Beals, chairman of the board, serial yacht collector, and man who hadn't looked me in the eye since 2013. He was the one who signed off on bringing in Damien, back when he thought Flash overrode Foundation. He wouldn't remember my birthday, but he'd remember this. I imagined him sitting in his Hamptons office, sipping something aged and absurdly expensive, reading that sentence 3 times before it sank in. He'd understand immediately. This wasn't a threat, it was a weather report, and the forecast, biblical. The message pinged off his inbox at 2:11 p.m. At 2:19, a flurry of encrypted chatter between Zurich, London. New York burst to life like an anthill someone had just kicked. I didn't have access to the content, but I didn't need it. I saw the digital wakes. 5 minutes later, Cassandra's LinkedIn profile showed a sudden flurry of activity. One post taken down. A new connection to an international compliance firm added. By 2:42, an internal memo leaked. Urgent BOD session moved up to 6 p.m. EST. Mandatory attendance. Damien's name wasn't listed in the attendee field. And that right there told me everything I needed to know. They were going around him. Finally, it had taken bounced payments, internal chaos, mounting investor pressure, and a fiscal cold sweat to make them realize Damien didn't hold the keys. I did. They could posture all they wanted. Threaten lawyers, send more emails, cry technical sabotage. None of it mattered because this was never about the money. It was about access. And access was loyalty bound to memory. Something they discarded the moment they let Damien cut me loose like a worn shoelace. At 3:03 p.m., I got a reply from a Proton mail address marked Board Counsel Privileged. Message body, we'd like to speak. Discreetly? You name the time. I smiled, slow and deliberate. Not yet. Let them stew a little longer. Let the board stare at those numbers and wonder how many other accounts were like it. Wonder what else I still had. Wonder if the ship had already hit the iceberg and they just hadn't felt the tilt yet, because I hadn't come back as an employee. I'd returned as a reckoning. The video call started 3 minutes late. Typical. I sat on my couch, camera on, coffee in hand, wearing a simple blue blouse and the quiet confidence of someone who'd already won. My apartment behind me looked serene, bookshelves, a potted fern. Chairman Meow curled like a judgmental crescent on the windowsill. Let them see how little I'd broken. Across the screen, Franklin D. Beals, looking like he hadn't slept since Nixon resigned. The leather behind him screamed old money and desperation. Beside him, a young woman in a charcoal blazer, company legal counsel, reading from a hastily assembled playbook and silently mouthing pre-approved phrases. There was an empty third window labeled Damien Glass not present. I raised my mug and smiled. Thank you for coming. Franklin cleared his throat. Miss Windsor, we appreciate your initiative in bringing this situation to light. Do you? I asked mildly, tilting my head, because it didn't seem like appreciation when I was publicly humiliated in front of a room full of my colleagues. He shifted uncomfortably, tugging at the corner of his shirt sleeve like it might save him from drowning. The lawyer spoke next. Nicole, we understand that certain assets are currently inaccessible due to an unforeseen misalignment of custodial protocol. That's a lot of words for you. Fired the one person who could fix your mess, I said. Her mouth twitched. Franklin looked down. No one tried to defend Damien. They knew. Let's keep this simple, I continued. You want access restored. I want compensation. But not just money. That would be too incomplete. I leaned forward just enough to let them feel the weight shift. My terms are as follows. 1. Severance equivalent to 10 years of my salary, paid upfront and off books using the Zurich Reserve Fund. 2. Full, immediate release and transfer of all my vested stock options into my private account, with no non-compete clause attached. And 3. This one's the real kicker, a formal, public statement from the board that Damian Glass is being terminated for gross financial mismanagement and reckless conduct. Silence. I let it sit. Then I reached down and slid a single-page PDF onto my screen share. Title, press release final, they read it. I watched their eyes move. Watched Franklin's jaw tighten at the sentence, following a comprehensive internal review. The board has unanimously voted to remove CEO Damian Glass due to multiple violations of fiduciary and strategic protocols. I'd written it myself. Clean, professional, devastating. The kind of language that sinks a man's future in under 60 seconds. The lawyer's voice wavered. This is unusually punitive. So was firing a woman who held your financial lifeline, I said, voice like ice over broken glass. You don't get to throw someone off a ship and then complain when they learn how to swim and come back with the map. Franklin finally spoke. And if we refuse, I smiled, slow and bright. Then I send a slightly longer version of that press release to every regulatory body, banking partner, and investment fund tied to your quarterly performance. Pause, and just for fun, I'll include metadata logs showing just how long the situation's been unresolved. Tick-tock. Another silence. Then the lawyer nodded once tight. You'll have it in writing within 24 hours. I'll restore access 24 hours after that, not a second before. And if I see a single clawback clause or trapdoor condition, I walk and the rainstorm turns biblical. Franklin looked at me for a long moment, not angry, not defensive, just stunned. You really were the foundation, weren't you? No, I said, I am the foundation. Just forgot the building doesn't stand without it. The screen blinked off, deal struck. The boardroom had officially become my stage. And Damian was already gone. He just didn't know it yet. The ocean made a sound like paper being torn in slow motion. I sat under a palm leaf awning at a beachfront cafe in Chalum, a passion fruit mojito sweating in my hand, bare feet burrowed into warm white sand like roots rediscovering the earth. Somewhere behind me, waiter hummed Sinatra. Somewhere in front of me, the Caribbean glistened like a secret too beautiful to speak aloud. On the flat-screen TV bolted above the bar, a blonde anchor with two white teeth cleared her throat and said, "Breaking news from the world of corporate finance. Kessler and Rowe has just issued a surprise statement announcing the immediate termination of CEO Damian Glass for what they are calling, quote, gross financial mismanagement and reckless conduct." She paused for dramatic effect. The board has declined to elaborate on specifics, citing internal compliance procedures. However, market analysts speculate that the shakeup may be tied to a recently resolved offshore access dispute, which briefly affected high-level liquidity operations. I took a slow sip, the rum sharp and sweet, and smiled like a woman who just heard her ex got audited and found God in the process. My phone buzzed once. I pulled it from the woven beach bag beside me and opened the app. One new notification, wire transfer received. Amount, $4,820,000 USD. Status cleared. Another buzz, a second one. Wire transfer received. Amount, $3,600,000 USD. Status cleared, then a third. I stopped counting after the fifth. The money came in bursts like applause after a long, slow curtain fall. Different accounts, different jurisdictions, but all signed, sealed, and delivered. Their debt paid, my silence bought, the storm had passed, and now, the final act. I opened my secure vault on the tablet and retrieved the compiled keys, 5 protocol chains, each one encoded, time-locked, and bound to biometric triggers. The digital equivalent of a nuclear briefcase. One more file to send. To the board's designated proxy, a private fiduciary in Liechtenstein who used words like instrument and escrow utility in his sleep. Didn't matter. All he needed was what I had. I attached the access bundles, encrypted them, and added one line to the email, "Pleasure doing business with you." Then I hit send, and that was it. I closed the tablet, set it face down on the table, and let the breeze carry away the last trace of Ohio chill still clinging to my bones. I wasn't going back. There was nothing to go back to. The woman who typed quarterly forecasts until her wrists went numb was gone. The vault they tried to bury had cracked open, and the dragon inside decided to fly south for the winter with interest. Somewhere, Damian Glass was probably shouting into a phone, pacing in his underdecorated condo, trying to understand how a filing cabinet in human form had just detonated his career with a smile and a spreadsheet. Good. Let him drown in it. I raised my glass toward the sun, the melting ice catching the light like diamonds. To Walter for trusting me, to the board for underestimating me, and to Damian for being dumb enough to hand me the match and then complain when the building burned. No tears, no regrets, just salt on the rim and fire in the rear view. Victory isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a woman alone on a beach, sipping a drink while the empire that exiled her sends wire transfers in surrender. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.